Welcome to another video, guys, and today we're going to talk about the IELTS speaking test, how you can go ahead and score a perfect 9 on the test. Now, the tips I'm going to cover in this video, they are true and tested 100%, so you do not need to worry about it. I think this is the only video you will need when you go on for the speaking section and you're not really sure how to go ahead and increase your score. If you're at 6 right now, you'll be able to move towards a 7. If you're at 7 already, you'll be able to move towards an 8. And so on and so forth. So definitely it's gonna increase your score. I just want you to stick with me because we have 15 very important points that I want to give you. Okay, so about this video, first I'll just give you the structure. The first thing I'll cover is the basic format. Quickly, in 1 or 2 minutes, I'll tell you about the IELTS speaking test format. Then I'll give you some general tips, and then I'll give you some section-wise tips. Okay, so if you don't know what section-wise is, just stick around. So the IELTS speaking test, coming to the format, is conducted in 3 parts, and these are the 3 sections that I'm talking about. Okay, part 1 is really a general introduction. When you actually go into the room, you talk to the examiner, and the first thing that he will ask you about, maybe your family, your job, your studies, your interests, really anything very, very general, he can ask you about that, he or she, whatever, and that's your first part. Part 2 will actually be your sort of like an extempore speaking, and this will be on everyday topics. So over here you will be given a card, sort of like this right now on the screen, and you can see this card has a few questions. Okay, and you will make sure that in that 1 minute to prepare, by the way, you get 1 minute to prepare, of course, so you will make sure in that 1 minute to prepare you can take some notes regarding what you would like to say about this topic, how you'd like to answer all these questions, and then you get 1 to 2 minutes to speak. So that's your part 2. And then finally, part 3 is the discussion on abstract topics. Now over here, the topic that comes in will be very, very related to whatever you talked about in part 2. So you can think of it as a very abstract discussion. Again, I'll come back to that later, but the questions that you may see over here are like, what kind of jobs are very good in your country, what kind of jobs are very popular in your country, something like that. Now these are abstract topics. Everyone may have a different answer for this, but there's really no answer. Okay, they can even ask you something like, what kind of flowers do people prefer to see in your country, or do people prefer to grow in your country, something like that. Very, very general, nothing too extreme really. Okay, so coming to the tips now. Now these are the tips and tricks for the IELTS speaking test. Now this is the part which will really, really boost your score, and it's going to help you make the maximum out of your preparation. Okay, so first we'll start with some general tips, then we'll move on to the section-wise tips. That's part 1, part 2, part 3. Okay, great. So for the general tips, the number 1 tip that I can give you is that a lot of people are making this mistake, but you're gonna be the one who actually comes out on top if you realize this, that you are marked on your English speaking. Okay, don't think that you are going to be marked on your ideas, your opinions. That does not matter during the test. Maybe you can change your mind while answering the questions. You can change your mind. So you can say something like, I'm sorry, I think I'm moving in the wrong direction. When I really think about this issue, I feel that the right way to go would be, and so on and so forth. You really just move on with this format. Something like this, you can easily do that. Your opinion doesn't really matter, but you being able to communicate your ideas to the examiner shows that you can use that language, English, and you can answer the question, right? And that's really what you want to do. That's really all you will be graded upon. Okay, so that's my first tip. Don't worry about your ideas, opinions. You can even make up things, imaginary things. You can make false examples, doesn't matter, as long as they seem okay to you and at the same time they seem believable, it's good enough. Okay, the second point over here is that don't rush or speak too fast. A lot of people would just go on and they would want to show they're very fluent in English by speaking extremely fast, and at times they would stutter, but at least they're speaking fast, right? That's wrong. That's gonna bring your score down. That's not a good way to go. Okay, and now the best way I would say you should go about this on the IELTS speaking test is try to see how the examiner speaks, and you will see that they will try to communicate with you in a very slow, clear, and basically at a regular pace. Okay, slow manner, clear manner, and their pace will be regular. That's really what you want to go for when you're taking the IELTS speaking test. You don't want to rush in, because chances are you're gonna make a mistake, you're gonna be stuttering, you're gonna go on and digress, something like that will happen, and that's something you wanna avoid. Okay? That's my point 2. Point 3 will be to use linking words. If you don't know linking words, they can be something like therefore, consequently, for instance, however. All of these words are linking words, right? Here's a chart on your screen, so you can actually go ahead and memorize some of these linking words. It's gonna make it a hell of a lot easier for you to actually keep these in mind. Okay, so that's my tip number 3. Moving on, tip number 4 we have over here is paraphrasing the question. A lot of times you have to buy yourself time on the test and you do not know how to start the answer. Maybe you're still thinking about whatever you're doing, but whatever your opinion is, you're thinking about it, doesn't matter. You can paraphrase the question. For instance, if the question is, what's the best way to buy a house? Well, you can say, the ideal way to buy a home, you ask? So, you see how I actually paraphrase the question, and then you can say, oh, I really think that, so and so. So you can really go ahead, start making up your sentences, like, you can start with the question. So you really need to go about and paraphrase the question. Even if you're repeating it, doesn't matter, but you need to paraphrase it, because otherwise it's gonna bring your points down. If you paraphrase it, of course, it's gonna bring your points up, so that's a good way to go. Okay. Point number 5 would be to use a wide range of vocabulary. Okay, this is extremely important, guys. Vocabulary is something that is going to bring your score up by a lot. If you know the synonyms, if you know words like pernicious, exacerbate, placate, all of these things, things like these can really bring your score up. And these are the words that you can commonly use even when you're having a conversation. Of course, you don't have to do that with your friends, but at the same time you realize that these words are very easy to use, and there's a lot more words out there. These 2-3 words I just had them in my mind, and I just talk to you about those. There's a lot more words that you can just easily use in the conversations, and it's gonna actually help you. Okay, so that's one more point. Moving on to point number 6, you need to reach the test center early. Reach the test center at least 30 minutes before your test starts, because your mind needs to get used to the fact that you're going to be taking the test now. So just for your psychological satisfaction, which by the way you don't really get to control so much, so it's really important that you go ahead, reach the center early. You're ready for the test, you're confident, you're not really very, very nervous, and you're not in a rush. Okay, that's the worst thing you can do to yourself. Giving the test in a rush, that's a bad idea. Okay. Next, we'll move on to point number 7, and that is to maintain eye contact with your recommender. Not your recommender, but your examiner. So as soon as you enter your room where the examiner is sitting down, he's going to be taking your test, please make sure that you have some eye contact going on over there. So, I'm not saying just keep staring into the eyes of the examiner. That's not what I'm saying. But still, optimally, keep looking into their eyes maybe once in 2 or 3 seconds, just to show that you're not afraid of creating eye contact. That creates a good impression. Of course, this shouldn't impact your scores, but it just gives them the impression that you're confident in yourself, you're confident in what you're doing, and you'll be able to answer whatever question they throw at you. Of course, they're still human, and all of these things, even though they're not asked to count it, but their mind is still thinking about this. So it's important that you can create a good conversation over there, and you want to show that you're ready for whatever they throw at you. Okay, so moving on to point number 8, and that is, don't forget the question. And this happens a lot of times. I am getting a question about why do you like a particular car, and I'm talking about the car, and then suddenly I start talking about the color, and then I'm talking about why that color is important to me. So that's not very good, actually. This car comes in the color mauve, and I personally like the color mauve because I have some memories attached to it, or something like that. So if you go ahead and do that, you're digressing, you're moving off the topic, you're not able to answer the question. And if you're not able to answer the question, the examiner won't tell you that, he'll just mark you down. So that's important, keep that in mind. Okay, all right, now we'll move on to the section wise tips. So part 1, part 2, part 3. Now these are very small. I'm not going to be having a lot of tips for these because the general tips covered most of it already, but there are some tips which apply to each of these sections, and I want you to have a special knowledge about this because this can dramatically increase your score. Okay, so I think there's only one tip for part 1 that I would like to give you. By the way, this section runs for 4 to 5 minutes. It's a general conversation, right? Like I told you in the beginning, the optimal answer length in this case is about 3 to 4 sentences. So try to keep your answers around 3 sentences. Try to make sure that whatever answer you give should be about 3 sentences. I'm not saying exactly 3, but sometimes, you can maybe give it in 2 sentences. Sometimes it can be 4 sentences, but try to make sure it's 3 sentences, because the answer that you provide, if it's not too long, not too short, that's optimal, because then the examiner can actually go ahead and ask you about some other questions, right? And there's a lot of questions that he would like to ask you. So make sure that you keep that in mind. Give him the ample time that he can communicate. It shouldn't be the case that only with 1 or 2 questions your complete section ended. That's a bad thing to do. Okay, so anyway, that was for part 1. Now we'll move on to part 2. For part 2, I have just a few tips for you, and the first one is that you should speak for 1.5 to 2 minutes. You need to get yourself used to it, so make sure that you have enough practice before the test about how it feels like when you want to speak for 1.5 to 2 minutes. Okay, if you're able to time yourself correctly, if you're able to cover everything in the question paper that you receive, you receive a small card that, like I showed you in the beginning. So if you're able to do that, answer all of these questions within 2 minutes, you're not digressing, you're using good vocabulary, you're using good linking words, all of that within 1.5 to 2 minutes, and you're used to that, chances are you're going to be able to reproduce that on the test day, and that's going to help you. Okay, moving on to point number 11, that is, you need to give reasons, use examples, you can even tell a story. Speaking for 1.5 to 2 minutes can be a lot. It's definitely not easy when you don't know what to really, detail, and when maybe you can finish very, very early, maybe you can finish within 1 minute. It's not a good thing to finish before 1 minute. So maybe try a story, give examples, something like that. It's gonna help you either way. Okay. Point number 12 would be not to worry about the fact that the examiner can stop you. If you're crossing 2 minutes and that's the limit for the section, then the examiner may stop you. Don't get worried and mess up your section 3 because of that. It's okay. Just understand that you only have 2 minutes, and that's a requirement by the IELTS. You can't really change that. So that's okay. And finally, in part 3, we have some more tips for you. So this is a general discussion, like I said. So the first thing I would like to tell you over here, point number 13, is that don't use your personal opinions. A lot of people would give their personal opinions. Like I said, which jobs are the highest paid ones in your country? Something like that. And you're talking to them about your business or your job. That's not a good thing to do, actually, because first off, you're digressing, and secondly, you're telling them about your personal opinion when they've never really asked for it. They only asked about the general opinion. So that's important. Remember that. Point number 14 is to buy yourself time. You can use phrases like and right. All of these things will actually help you make more time for yourself, for your mind to think, because in this section, remember, you don't really have any time to prepare. The examiner will ask you the question, and you're gonna have to answer the question right back. So over here, repeating the question, paraphrasing it, using these phrases like right, and elongating phrases like however, something like that. So that buys you more time, and trust me, it might seem like a short amount of time, but it can be a lot when your brain has to think of the answer. Okay. That's really it. That's really all the tips, and I'm gonna give you one bonus tip which applies to almost everything. It's not really depending on the section or anything, and that tip is that you should not use all of these filler words. First off, they're awful fillers. If I'm explaining like this, so I went to the school on that morning, and I just this doesn't look attractive at all. This is going to bring my score down. If I'm very, very slow and I'm using as filler, that's only going to bring my score down. In fact, in that case, if you're not sure what to say, take a deep breath. Wait for 1 second. It's okay to actually, not say anything for 1 second. Like this. I just did that right now. 1 second, I didn't say anything, and you guys listened. It's okay, it's perfectly natural. But try not to use these and all of these filler words, because they are extremely bad. I've seen the scores go down when people do that. Okay, so hopefully these tips should actually help you in your process for the IELTS speaking test. I hope you're able to score a perfect 9. I would love to know your scores. Comment them down below. If you like the tips that I'm giving, subscribe to the channel. By the way, I have some important news for you. In my next video, I'll be doing a speaking section live with you. So I'll be solving a whole speaking section. I'll be literally putting the questions in front of you, and I'll be answering them for you, so you can know what is the optimal answer to go with. And I'm pretty sure that's gonna be amazingly helpful. So I'll do that for you guys in my next video. So stick around, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for sticking around.